Goes wrong. Cool. Thank you for joining the second ever New in Progression session. We did one of these a couple of months ago. Very nice for me just to get a chance to share everything that our product team has been doing. So yeah, it's going to be quite a whistle-stop tour today, quite a lot to get through. So we're going to be covering our product roadmap, a bit of a demo of some of the new features we've been shipping lately, and then a preview of some of the stuff that's coming up next that's looking quite exciting. If you do have questions or feedback in this live session as we go through, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try and leave a few minutes at the end. But otherwise, this will be available to watch back as well. And we're always available to talk and do more detailed demos as well. If we haven't met, my name's Katie. I'm Progression's product lead, so heading up our product teams. We are constantly working very hard on the product to continually improve it. So yeah, it's really great for me to be here sharing some of the stuff we've been working on lately. I don't know if anyone here is new to Progression or if you're watching back and are kind of newer to us, not a customer yet. Progression is a career design platform. We exist to give career clarity to organisations, their employees, their managers, make sure that everyone is crystal clear on what's expected of them and what their opportunities for growth look like. We achieve that through essentially two sides of our product, the framework product, which is where you actually build out the requirements, the expectations, place people in their positions and help them see what their career paths are. And then the growth side of the product, where you actually check in against the kind of skills that are required of you in your position, collect updates, log your progress as it happens. So the outcome, we hope, is career clarity, knowing exactly what's expected of you, where you can go and where you are on that journey. I'm going to jump straight into our roadmap, which hopefully puts a bit of context around some of the things I'm going to be showing you and gives you a bit of a sense of what's coming up next and what's important to us at the moment. If any of you work in product, I'm sure you're aware there's always a million things you could do. So it's probably useful just to get a bit of an overview of where we're at and what we think is important at the moment. So we've been really focusing on what I would call our build side of the product. So that's actually helping you create your frameworks, which essentially everything else hinges off. So it's really important to get that right. So we've been doing a lot of work around making it really easy, frictionless, collaborative, supported by AI to create your framework in the first instance. And in particular, making that so that it's ready to scale. And by that, I mean it works not just for your first team, but for any subsequent teams you might want to onboard onto Progression. So if you're a larger organization, we actually work really well for that kind of use case. And next, we're looking at what I've kind of termed manage. So this is like how you actually, once your content is up and running, your frameworks are live, like how do you make sure that they actually stay valuable and useful over time? How do you actually keep track of Progression once it's out in an organization and multiple teams are using it? So I'll show you a couple of features we've been thinking about where we think about how we support you to actually manage your frameworks more centrally. And we're particularly excited by the kind of concept of putting analytics and insights on top of your framework as well. So I'll be showing some progress around how we actually help you keep track on how your framework and your teams are ultimately performing and using this framework content. And finally, some of the stuff that's coming up in the future on our roadmap, we're really going to be like swinging back to our growth side of the product, which is essentially how do we help you leverage, all of this content? How do we actually use that to help people grow? How do people engage with it? How do they actually feel that this framework is helping them grow? So that's going to be a big focus area. We've got some pretty exciting plans in this area, so I'm going to be sharing some of our thoughts around that. And we also recognise that we really need to bolster up the way that we integrate and automate and essentially make it as easy as possible to use Progression in amongst your other tools. So I'll be sharing some of our thoughts on that as well. Okay, let's dive straight into what's new. Start with a fairly straightforward one. Hopefully you're still with me as I jump over to this tab. Let me know if that's looking okay. So essentially the first piece I'm going to talk you through is we've just done a little bit of work to make it much easier to use AI when you're generating content in Progression. So you might be familiar with our skill generator, which kind of spits out a whole skill for you. We've basically moved some of those AI prompts essentially in line. So if you find that you're missing a little piece of content in the skill, hit the generate button. Takes a few seconds, it's working away in the background. You can keep working on other aspects of the skill while that generates. But in a few seconds, we're talking to GPT-3 in the background. There we have a little preview of a description for this skill of user focus. You can kind of read it, see if it looks good, try again if you're not happy with it, or then just go ahead and apply it to that skill. and you're done. You didn't have to write anything. And essentially just start looking out for these scattered throughout the product as you're doing your build. So you can generate examples for skills. You can generate whole new levels as well if you need to add an additional level. So just putting that in place where it's probably most useful to you. The next piece that I'm going to show you, a bit more advanced, a bit more interesting. We have shipped a feature which we're calling templates, and alongside that, a couple of extra features around protected content. So this is starting to get into that idea that to set you up for scale, set you up to kind of not just create one team, but create multiple teams. It's actually really useful to have consistency. It's really useful to have a starting off point. So the whole idea behind templates, which you'll find over here in the side navigation, I'll show you an example one. Essentially what you're doing here is creating the sort of skeleton or scaffolding for like any subsequent team to follow. So for example, you've got a sort of president in your organization for how you do career ladders, how you like to name your teams, name the positions, have all the different tracks. You can essentially create this within a template. And then any subsequent teams can use that template as their kicking off point to create their own teams. So you're essentially building in that consistency from the start. You're saving a lot of work because you can regenerate, as many teams as you want from this one template. So we hope it just really helps make the creation process a lot faster and more efficient. It also helps keep a lid on consistency as well. So something you can do in here is actually lock down some of the content in the template so that any subsequent editors or admins who come in can't actually edit that content. So if you want, for example, your company values to be used in every single team, pop them all in the template, pop them in a category, lock that category, and that essentially means that no one can mess around with that content. That content within this category will always be available in all of those teams. And you can keep categories unlocked as well. So if you actually want to say, I'd like all the subsequent teams to have a leadership category, but I'd like them to go in and add their own, leave that unlocked. They'll still see the category when they go and create their team, but then they can go ahead and add their own sort of functional specific skills. And the final piece of this is that you can also lock the ability to edit skills on the skill level as well. So if you actually don't want anyone to sort of ever mess around with the skill, we've heard this feedback quite a lot because skills are kind of reused across teams in progression. That's one of the strengths of skills in our system, but quite often you find some editors come in, change the skill. They didn't realize it was used in lots of different teams. So if that's a skill you want to protect and keep it consistent, you can actually lock that skill. It's only editable now to admins, so no one can come in and mess around with that content. So a few nice pieces there that we hope really kind of bake in consistency and make it a lot more easier to kind of get up and running really quickly. The next piece, it's not quite live yet. It's in final testing. I can still demonstrate it. It's something we call invariant skills. So as I mentioned, skills in progression are used across multiple teams. The benefit of that being that if you have a skill in one team, in your position, if you're a product designer, you can look at the skill requirements of another position like product management and actually compare and say, well, we actually share some of these skills. They're the same skill. And that makes it really easy to sort of compare and see which other positions you might be able to grow into. The downside is that sometimes the actual nuance of what's required of that skill is quite different within those two different teams. So what we can do now is create variants of skills to get around that, which is pretty cool. So if I show you how that works, it's a pretty new feature up here. So say we've got a communication skill, we want to tailor that a little bit so that it's a bit more relevant. Particularly when you're looking at the examples of how someone should demonstrate that, it might be quite different between product and design, for example. Create that variant, call it design. To create the variant, some aspects of it are locked, so essentially you can maintain that synchronicity. It's still the same root communication skill, but what we are able to do is then tailor that skill and make it relevant to individual disciplines, but still crucially maintain that sort of centralized ability to cross-reference that skill and use it across different teams. So that'll be live and coming very soon. We really hope it helps kind of keep skills in check, keep as many skills shared across teams as possible, which gives you those growth opportunities, but then also let you tailor it down where that's really relevant. We're whipping through these. If everyone's keeping up, do come and watch it back because it's quite a lot to get through. This is a bit of a slide that covers a few smaller things, but actually altogether they again just help you sort of manage your content and positions within progression, again with the more kind of organizational level scale in mind. 3 new things which I can show you here. So firstly, skills now have change history. So again, if you have lots of people working on your content, you can see here a kind of change log of this developing over time. So if you want to trace back the paper trail of changes that have been made to skills, you can come in here, see all those changes over time, and even like see what was changed. So if you do want to revert it back, it's really easy to kind of keep tabs on that. The next one that was in that list was multi-salary bands. I'm in a template. Hang on, jump to real team. So we've heard this from quite a lot of customers, particularly kind of global customers who have different teams in different locations, the ability to actually specify different salary bands for the same position across basically the same position in different locations. So one use case for this might be you have a team in the US and that's their salary. You have another team in the UK and they have a different salary. So now it's very easy to have the same position, have multiple salary bands. You could also use this for, say, sort of remote versus co-located salaries, for example. It's quite a nice flexible feature that, again, just kind of sets us up well for scale. And the final thing that was on my list was the ability to more easily sort of manage team design within progression. This design and product team is something that quite a lot of our customers find ourselves in, where they started with product design, they had to add product design leadership as their team grew. They then added product management because it shares a few skills. They added product leadership, and suddenly the framework is like really huge, quite complicated. There's not quite so many shared skills anymore. They want to kind of break down those teams, but that wasn't very easy to do historically. It's very easy now because we can essentially just create our new product team. So we wanted to shift all the product positions and tracks over there. We can simply move to product, thinking about it, and that will basically move everything. Oh, it will if it was working. Classic. There's always one. But yes, essentially this lets you, let me see if duplicate works. Oh, that just duplicates within the team. But yeah, essentially when that works, it's much easier for you then to kind of come in, separate, organize, keep on top again of your teams and make sure that content is just staying really sort of consistent and easy to use over time, which is the ultimate goal of a lot of our framework work. I have 2 more demos. Teams Overview and Skill Library. So this again is really looking at this kind of centralized management and supporting you in rolling out across multiple teams. We actually really appreciate how much work that is, to actually get the framework content, have all your collaborators, this is a big project essentially. And then that's how we describe it. Your frameworks are really like an evolving project that takes a lot of people. 2 things that we hope make that a bit easier. Firstly, this new build overview page, which essentially lets you kind of see at a glance all the teams in my organization, the status that the build is currently at, any open comments that I need to go and kind of resolve and look at, if people have left feedback, keep tabs on who's editor of what team, if I need to go and like ask someone to keep working on their team to get it ready to launch, last edited, and a few kind of useful basic kind of pieces of functionality. So essentially what you can do is from here, it's then just start moving your teams through these swim lanes and just keeping tabs at a very kind of high level of what's going on with your team. So we really hope this is a kind of useful overall kind of project management feature that helps you manage progression across your organization. The final bit here is the new skills management page. I don't know if people accessed it before, but it was essentially just sort of a list of a quite visual overview of all the skills that are in use in your organization. We've basically overhauled this and put a lot more data around it that hopefully makes it a lot more intuitive and simple to like keep the skills in your organization in check. So we actually find that a lot of our customers, their skills get really bloated, really unwieldy. They have a load of skills that they've created that aren't actually in use, or they're kind of legacy. It's actually really hard to keep tabs on that. So we've got a few kind of extra bits of functionality here that we think actually help it make it much more easier to basically audit and keep your skill content really high quality. We particularly like this unused filter, which just very quickly shows you like I have all these skills that aren't actually being used by any teams, I can then very quickly just go in and delete all those skills and keep them in check if they're actually not being used anymore, or there are kind of older versions of things. Likewise with need attention, this one doesn't need any attention, but if we basically there filter to skills that have unresolved comments or skills that have missing levels or examples. So again, it just helps you see which skills are actually incomplete or have open feedback to address on them. So yeah, we hope this view just helps you keep tabs on your skills and makes it much easier to manage them more centrally. The final piece, which is not quite ready to demo, I'm going to jump back into the slide decks. The last few are just slides. Yeah, on the kind of insights and analytics side of things, just giving you much more visibility into how your content and how your teams are actually engaging with progression. We recognise that's super important. And we have so much data that we think is really, really interesting, not just from like people directly engaging with progression, so actually just showing you the kind of trends of how people are entering wins, are people completing their check-ins on time. Because of all the data we hold on actual skills, we can actually start to show you some really interesting stuff that kind of really helps you understand the skill profile within your organisation. So actually helping you see which are our strongest skills as an organisation, where do we have an improvement in opportunities, which really helps you kind of see, you know, even kind of think about hiring and team design, where you might want to invest in learning and development or training opportunities. So just a snapshot really of like the skills that are actually in use in your organisation, maybe in a way that you hadn't actually realised. And the same on the kind of growth. And we don't like the word performance. We kind of tend to prefer growth or personal development, but you can actually start to see, you know, who in your organisation is like really doing an amazing job. They've been exceeding in their last 5 check-ins. They're probably ready to start thinking about promotion. So you can start thinking about budgeting and keeping on top of those people who are really kind of over performing relative to their position. Again, we hold all that data, so it's very easy for us to actually expose these insights to you in a way that just makes it very easy for you to keep on top of and take action on. So this is coming very soon. It's active development, so we expect early next quarter we should have this delivered as well. So that's everything that's new. Just 3 more slides from me on things that are coming up. So it'd be really interesting to like hear some feedback on these things. They're in active development. We're going to be approaching them over the next month or so. So we're really swinging back to the growth side of the product now. You know, after all this investment on the framework side, we think that's in a pretty good place. So now actually looking at how we help people leverage growth on top of these frameworks. Something we're really excited by is just almost like really radically simplifying. I don't know how many of you, again, are kind of currently using our product. There's a whole load of features in there that we've shipped over the last couple of years, and it's really just consolidating all of that into like one story that really helps an individual see, how am I growing? Where could I go? How am I doing on my path to get there? Where was I and where am I now? What's my action plan? I'm really helping that pairing of managers and reports together work on this. So this is essentially a concept sketch. It's not finalized, but this is essentially this one view that you and your manager can look at together and set those intentions, set a goal position, see your career pathway really clearly, compare that against positions that you might want to grow into, see your history of check-ins and see your kind of growth and development over time, see what you're putting into the platform and see how that's contributing to your growth. See the outcome of the last career conversation that you had, your last check-in, and actually see what were my strengths, what were my areas of improvement, and use that to inform an action plan, and then be able to set actions, which you can already do within progression, and just have one view where everything is there all in one place, and really gives clarity, we hope, on what am I focusing on, where have I been, and where could I go. So yeah, that's something we're going to be kicking off very soon, and we're very excited by. Another thing we're very excited by is the ability to essentially connect your tools that you're already using to progression and use that to really kind of automate a lot of your engagement with progression. So essentially, like, we're very sensitive to the fact that, like, you know, no one wants another tool to use. You're maybe doing some of this work in other systems. You maybe have a kudos tool. You're doing work all the time. If you're an engineer, you're using Jira or Linear, you're making progress there. But then how do you remember to log that in progression and make sure it counts towards your growth story? So we feel like we've got a load of opportunity here to basically go to where you're already doing work, particularly using AI to like support you to make that feel really intuitive and straightforward and exciting, and essentially like surface, you know, insights about how you're growing that you might not even have realized yourself. So we're very excited by this theme as well. And again, it's something we're starting to explore and kick off very soon. And the final piece, I don't know how many people are familiar with our current check-ins feature. It's essentially where you go through all of the skills in your position, make a kind of judgment about how you're doing. Are you meeting or working towards or exceeding those requirements? Your manager does the same, and then you have a kind of final conversation which spits out that kind of summary of the growth that you've been working on lately. Check-ins are amazing because they basically help you, we call them the sort of rubber stamp of growth. They really help you kind of concretely say, yes, I've improved in this skill. Here's the evidence, it's been approved by my manager. I'm ready. But they are very high effort. You have to go through this whole process. It can probably feel like quite a lot of effort and quite stressful. So we're basically looking at like, how can we make check-ins, that sort of skill growth moment, happen as often as possible with as little effort as possible. So we're starting to look at some concepts around more modular, flexible check-ins. So you can maybe even check in only against one skill at a time. So if you actually feel that you've made some really great progress in one area, you can just really quickly open a check-in, have more of a conversation with your manager, agree that you've improved, and then suddenly that's another point on your growth story. And even again, starting to look at the potential of AI to support that as well. So like, if purely writing the content or like taking all the updates that you've aggregated, all the feedback and all the wins, if we're able to sort of generate that into a story of your growth, that again, you can kind of review and kind of confirm and have that conversation with your manager in a much more intuitive, exciting way. That's the kind of things we're looking at here. So yeah, really excited by this one. Check-ins is one of our flagship features, and we really, really want to make it work as hard as it can for, again, that reporter manager pair to feel like it's the real moment where we're able to kind of make someone really feel their growth. So yeah, just to recap, essentially these are the things we talked about, just in case it sparks any more questions or thoughts or ideas. So all that work we've done recently on build, if you are building your framework with us already, do go check those out, give them a go. Let us know your feedback, because we're constantly working on those. Some of those managed tools and the kind of insights piece, look out for those landing really soon. And if you want more of a demo or more kind of introduction to those, don't hesitate to get in touch. And some of those things that are coming soon, just watch this space. We're always looking for people to sort of beta test and get feedback on. So if any of those kind of spark your interest, do get in touch as well. That is it from me. If anyone has any immediate feedback who's on the call, go ahead and drop it in the chat. But otherwise, you can always find us in app in the chat bubble. There's a link to our changelog there, which is where I always post these product updates as they're happening. So a really good place to go and find out more. And if you want more of that deeper dive, as I said, go do book a demo with us as well. You can do that through progression.co, and we'd be more than happy to take you through some of this in more detail.